How to become a supercentenarian. The Endogenous Radiation Damage Theory of Aging, Part 1. Of all the proposed theories for the mitigation of aging, none of them will create extreme longevity in humans until the problem I present herein is sufficiently resolved. What is aging? Aging is the inability of the body to repair itself, which eventually leads to visible aging, loss of life force, and the permanent unwinding of your mortal coil. Aging is a disease caused by a combination of DNA damage, epigenetic changes, telomere shortening, replicative senescence, loss of proteostasis, stem cell depletion, oxidative stress, glycation, and other factors. Statistically, we know that only 1 in 700 centenarians will live to the age of 110. To create a supercentenarian and defeat aging, we must consider a crucial yet unexplored theory that must take precedence in study above all others. I call my hypothesis the endogenous radiation damage theory of aging. In layman's terms, what that means is if nothing else kills us, we eventually succumb to radiation poisoning created from within. Let's look at the 3 culprits of our demise. They are the elemental isotopes deuterium, potassium-40, and sodium-24. First, let us examine the role of deuterium, a stable isotope of hydrogen with a natural abundance of 1 per 7,000 of hydrogen. The nucleus of deuterium, called a deuteron, has 1 proton and 1 neutron, whereas a normal hydrogen, the simplest element in the universe, has a nucleus of just 1 proton. The average deuterium level in the Earth's water is 155 parts per million, and our bodies downregulate that to about 115 parts per million of what is found in nature. It stands to reason that if deuterium had no harmful effect on the body, we would not attempt to expel it. In the process of creating ATP in our mitochondria, deuterium is poorly managed and has a cascade of harmful effects. Griffiths, 1974, stated, and I quote, "When deuterium is involved in a chemical reaction, consideration must be given to a slight change in the inductive effect. As deuterium is more electronegative than hydrogen, hyperconjugative effects are also involved, since carbon deuterium-3, for example, is less delocalized than a carbon-hydrogen-3, and more important, the effective size of a carbon-deuterium bond is smaller than the effective size of a carbon-hydrogen bond. Thus, steric effects have a part to play, reinforcing our contention that any highly stereospecific enzyme molecule containing a deuteron in an important position has a potential for participating in an error reaction." End quote. Griffith's theory has to do with affecting the shape of enzyme molecules involved in DNA replication, namely stereoisomers, molecules that are like a butterfly in symmetry, to give you an example, called chirality, which they lose when a hydrogen atom on one side is mirrored by a deuterium atom on the other, thereby destroying the stereospecific property needed for its optimal function. In layman's terms, it's as if one wing of a plane looked the same, but was slightly heavier than the other wing. It would be a lot harder to fly. Also, chemical bonds created by deuterium are stronger than normal hydrogen bonds. This requires more energy to break during metabolic reactions. This creates a cascade of inefficiency in DNA replication, errors in transcription, and a gradual reduction of base pairs of DNA over a lifetime. This leads to senescence and apoptosis, also known as dormancy and programmed cell death. This is a big problem. But there is a bigger, even more fundamental one. In my theory, we look specifically at the electron transport chain. Let's simplify. The electron transport chain uses the electron and proton from hydrogen to create ATP, the primary energy of our biology. The presence of a deuteron is unwelcome in this main energy production channel because the additional neutron has no place or function. It is not needed and not wanted. It causes the electron transport chain to stutter every time the system expects a hydrogen, but gets a deuterium. This unwanted neutron in the deuteron is ejected, causing a constant bombardment of surrounding molecules, cells, and tissues with gamma radiation. This gamma particle rips through the DNA, causing single and double strand breaks, which I hypothesize is the primary cause of genetic mutation. This hiccup in the electron transport chain is ongoing from before we are born to our dying breath. Interestingly, studies have shown a relationship between people living in mountain areas where water naturally contains less deuterium and increased longevity. But too much deuterium is only one form of radioactive damage from within. There are two more we will cover. Now we come to potassium-40. Potassium-40 is a radioactive isotope of potassium which has a very long half-life of precisely 1.251 times 10 to the 9th in years. It makes up 0.012% or 120 parts per million of the total amount of potassium found in nature. Potassium-40 is an example of an isotope that undergoes all three types of beta decay. 89.28% of the time, it decays to calcium-40 with emission of a beta particle and an electron, with a maximum energy of 1.33 electron volts and an antineutrino. Roughly 10.72% of the time, it decays to argon-40 by electron capture, with the emission of 1.46 electron volts of gamma ray emission and a neutrino. What does this mean? Simply, it means you are getting bombarded from radiation from within. For you see, other than getting it from external sources, potassium-40 is also created within our cells. This is according to Panos Pappas' theory of oxymutation, supported by Kervran and Komaki. His theory states, sodium-23 plus electrical excitation plus oxygen-16 equals potassium-39 plus energy. This, he has proposed, is a fundamental energy creation mechanism parallel to the electron transport chain, and accounts for the extra energy requirements needed by the body that is not accounted for by ATP. This reaction is stable and does not produce any endogenous radiation. Unfortunately, a percentage of oxygen utilized in oxymutation is oxygen-17. There is precisely 0.0375% that is naturally occurring O17. Unfortunately, a percentage of oxygen utilized in oxymutation is oxygen-17. Oxygen-17 by itself is stable, but the final product is potassium-40, which is radioactive. The equation is sodium-23 plus electrical excitation plus oxygen-17 equals potassium-40 plus energy. This small yet significant percentage of oxygen becomes potassium-40. This is on top of what we already absorb of potassium-40 from food. Because of this, a human body, measured by a Geiger counter, is most always more radioactive than the background. The amount of radioactive isotope potassium-40 in a 70 kilogram person is about 5,000 becquerels. This represents 5,000 atoms undergoing radioactive decay each second. About 1 out of every 10 disintegrations of potassium-40 is a gamma ray burst, implying that about 500 gamma rays are produced each second from potassium-40 alone. Maybe glowing from within is not such a good thing after all. 2 down, 1 to go. Let's examine the third culprit of our mortality, sodium-24. Sodium-24 is a radioactive isotope and created from common sodium-23 by neutron bombardment. This neutron bombardment can come from the ejected neutron of deuterium. With a 15-hour half-life, sodium-24 decays to magnesium-24 by emission of an electron and 2 gamma rays. This can be easily measured in blood plasma to validate. Gamma radiation never has been, and never will be a friend of life on Earth. So, these three endogenous sources of radiation in concert with wear and tear and all the other mechanisms of aging eventually weakens our body's repair mechanism to the point the downward spiral into oblivion is guaranteed, but there is no money back. To use the analogy of a vortex, velocity increases as one moves away from the source. In this case, it is the velocity of entropy, and this is why only 1 in 700 centenarians makes it to the age of 110. Double-strand DNA breaks occur continually from beta and gamma emission, from deuterium, radioactive potassium, and the atomic transmutation of sodium in vivo, until we are unable to mitigate the damage and we lose all bioimpedance and take that final journey to the undiscovered country, from whose bourne no traveler returns. So it should be quite clear, our true longevity is measured by how well we manage the fallout of our endogenous radiation. This is the fundamental upstream problem at the source that gives rise to all the downstream issues that anti-aging science is currently addressing. To myself, it seems every scientist and researcher in the life extension community is simply kidding themselves until they resolve this issue of mitigating the beta and gamma particle emission from within our own cells. Then and only then will true life extension, utilizing other novel methods of improving our repair mechanisms, be possible. If it is valid that man used to live to 900 plus years and certain passages of the Bible are not a work of fiction, then what is it that occurred to shorten our lifespans? What secret did our forefathers have that we have lost? This, my dear humans, is the question of all questions. How can we find this Holy Grail? In fact, a clue exists within our very own bones, which are engineered to last for thousands of years, yet everything else gives way much sooner. So how do we effectively activate superconductivity within our own cells in this temporal matrix and prolong the decay of spin? How do we make gravity work for us instead of against? How do we scavenge and deal with the radioactive particles created as a byproduct of our own energy production system? How do we age slower and live longer? How do we make 140 the new 40? This has been the quest of the ages. In part 2 of my endogenous radiation damage theory of aging, I propose a novel negentropic solution to dramatically increase longevity, utilizing emerging discoveries in theoretical physics, vortex-based mathematics, nanomaterial sciences, and regenerative medicine. The greatest journey of all time is to unlock the secrets of oneself.